Okay. So right on the dot, 10 a.m. Welcome to our summer baking class. It's mostly called summer baking because we're doing it in the summer, but also all of the recipes are sort of geared towards summer treats and summer flavors and summer seasonal fruits and berries and things like that. So things that you can find a lot of in the summer, things that like feel really good and healthy in the summer, healthy in quotes because we are baking here and we're using traditional ingredients. If anybody does have any questions about how to make substitutions, definitely contact me or ask anything here that you might want to in the chat box. And there are options that you can do to make some of these recipes a little, let's say, lower in the saturated fats like butter. You can replace Greek yogurt with some of those types of things. There's different things you can do, but we're going for the straightforward traditional methods. I want to teach not only the methods, but combinations of flavors that just work really well. And there's no surprise that chocolate chip cookies are one of the classics and traditional. I really like this recipe. It's a little chewy, it's a little soft, but it's also firm enough that for me it makes a great sandwich for ice cream sandwiches. I love a good chocolate chip cookie vanilla ice cream sandwich. And then these lemon sugar cookies are incredible with the raspberry sorbet. So you just have summer in a bowl if you do that, or in a little mini sandwich. We're doing a couple different sizes of cookies just to show the variety that you can do, but really easy, really fast, really straightforward. The most important thing when you're baking, especially baking, is to read the recipe all the way through. When you're cooking, you can kind of fudge it with recipes. You play around with spices and flavors because you want it to taste the way you want it to, but baking is definitely more of a science than cooking. Cooking is more of an art. So you want to follow the recipe. The science has kind of already been figured out. The chemicals react in a really specific way. Baking soda, baking powder, both of those are chemical leavening agents, naturally occurring chemicals, so they're still good for us. There's things that work, and then there's things that don't work. So you don't really want to mess around with quantities, or like you can't add another egg and expect the outcome to be the same. So you definitely want to read the recipe all the way through. Make sure you know what you're doing, what's going to be asked of you later on in the process. Make sure you have the right equipment or a substitute piece of equipment. And once you've gotten that started, you know kind of how to get going. The chocolate chip cookies require about 375 in the oven. The lemon cookies want a little lower, more gentle heat at 350. Sugar cookies, we want to try to keep them a little paler of a golden color. So we're going to start with the chocolate chip cookies because we want that at a higher heat. We'll get that in, get those baked, then we can turn the oven down, and in the meantime, get the lemon cookies going, and we'll get all of this done hopefully in the next hour. Should be pretty easy. Really important to look at your ingredients and to make sure that you've kind of done what is already asked of you. If it says softened butter, then it expects you to have already done that. It's not melted butter, it's softened. So you want to leave it out on your counter for a little while, or maybe in a hot spot somewhere near your oven. If your oven is on, there's usually a place in the side that you can kind of start softening your butter. If it gets a little bit melty, that's okay. I've got some here that kind of melted in my wrapper. Turn the oven on and it just melted right away. That is okay. That will mix with the butter that is still solid, and it'll be a nice softened butter. You just don't want to have completely melted butter. That will change the consistency of the cookies. It won't quite work out the same. So you want it to have that butter already softened. That's part of the process. For the lemon cookies, there's an ingredient down at the bottom for rolling the cookies in. It's lemon sugar, so that would already be made. I already made mine. If you need to make yours, if you want to, it only takes a minute, so I'm sure you'll have time to fit that in. It's just sugar mixed with some lemon zest. You can totally leave that out, though. It's not required because we're going to put lots of lemon flavor inside the cookies. So again, there are some minor substitutions, but in terms of the science of these projects, you kind of want to stick to what it says. So we're going to start with our chocolate chip. I've got my oven on. I've got my baking sheets already lined with parchment. So that's ready. If you have silicone mats, that would work fine. I don't recommend foil because that conducts heat and it'll make the bottom of the cookies hotter than they would be normally. So you don't want to do that. Paper or silicone, or if you don't have either of those, just pan spray your baking sheet and they'll be fine. So I want a half a cup of butter for the chocolate chip cookies. That is exactly 1 stick. I'm going to use, let's see, this one. It's mostly soft, not really melty. Want to get all of that in there. Okay. The sugar cookies have even more butter, but they make a lot more. So if you wanted to, you could cut it in half. It's just about the egg. You can't really, that's not true. You can cut 1 egg in half, and I'll get to that. If you wanted to reduce any of these recipes, you could. It's just sort of the egg is the limiting factor. You would have to beat it up and then split that equally in half, which is absolutely doable. We're going to go with the classic. We're doing half a cup of regular sugar and half a cup of brown sugar. That helps give these cookies like more of the caramel kind of flavor. Brown sugar really helps to accentuate that sort of more molassesy flavor that you can get in a darker cookie. So we're going to do a half a cup of each of those. I'm going to use my 1/4 cup just because it's a little easier to scoop into my containers. But when you're doing brown sugar, you want to always make sure that you're kind of packing it in and leveling it off really well to make sure that you're getting the right amount. If it's sort of fluffy and not packed in there, then you're not actually getting the measurement that's being asked for. Unless a recipe says not packed or loosely packed, that will be specific. Otherwise, you usually want to do this just to kind of get it in there to make sure. So we're doing a half a cup, so I need 2 of these. And then the same with the granulated sugar, just a half a cup, so I'm doing 2 of these. The recipe asks for you to mix your dry ingredients in a bowl separately, which we will do. It doesn't really matter what order you do that in, as long as you mix them separately and don't just add them into your mixer. You do kind of want to combine the dry ingredients first. We will get to that. First thing we want to do, though, is cream these together really, really well. Creaming cookie dough this is the key to the cookie doughing method, like creaming. You want to get your butter and sugar really, really, really light and fluffy and well mixed together. So if you're using a stand mixer like this, you want to adjust the speed gradually, like bringing it up 1 at a time. Never go from 0 to 10. Like all in one switch, it will really not help your engine last a long time. If you gradually increase and reduce the speed, then your engine will last a lot longer. The motor of the machine will last a lot longer. If you don't have a stand mixer, you can do this part in a food processor. Just use the blade attachment. You can like kind of whip them together, make them really, really light and fluffy. You're adding a lot of air that way too. Or you can do it by hand. That's how people have done it for hundreds of years. You just get a hard spoon or a wooden spoon, and you get your arm workouts for the day. You switch arms to make sure that you're getting a good workout. The point about this is to get it incredibly well combined, and then we're going to add in the eggs and vanilla and let that go to town. We want to get it really light and fluffy. The amount of air that we get into here will help the leavening process, and it just makes it more blended throughout so that when we cook it, your sugar and butter don't just sort of like melt out. It's very well emulsified and it kind of cooks together. So it's part of the science of the process. You can probably see everything is a little bit stuck to the sides. So I'm going to use a spatula. You need to definitely have a good rubber spatula for this process because you want to scrape down the sides of the bowl really well. Make sure that you're getting around the bottom. There's a little, it's actually called the nipple of the bowl down at the bottom that like comes up and things get stuck around it all the time. So you want to make sure you're scraping down that a lot. You might have other names, that's one of them. So that is going, we're going to add in our egg and vanilla. It's just 1 egg and a teaspoon of vanilla. I usually never crack an egg on the sharp side of a bowl, especially if it's my food is in that bowl, because then you're more likely to get broken shell in your food. So I crack it on a nice sort of flat surface like the counter, and then I have a much better time of not breaking it really jaggedly into my food, which you don't want. So 1 egg, 1 teaspoon of vanilla. Vanilla is a really awesome thing. If you use lots of vanilla and nothing else, it tastes like vanilla. If you are making chocolate cake and you don't put in vanilla, it actually will taste less chocolatey. Like, it enhances the other flavors, and it just makes it nice and naturally sweet without adding extra sugar. We have plenty of sugar already. So once the egg and the vanilla is in, you really want to let this go for a while. Like, it doesn't really hurt it to, at this point, let it beat for a while. You want to let it get extremely fluffy, very pale in color. It's going to look almost white, and then, or khaki white, and then it's going to look like it's practically doubled in volume. That's what we're sort of going for. You want to just really let it go, get the egg really incorporated in there very well. So I'm going to put this at about a medium speed. Yeah, that's at 4, sort of halfway up. I think that that's going to be okay. I might need to scrape it down once through the process, but yeah, I probably will, just to make sure that anything around the edges is not getting left out of the party. In the meantime, I'm going to get a bowl and get the dry ingredients together. I don't know if you can already see sort of the changing color and texture. Give it one light scrape down the side. I can kind of see some vanilla and some egg yolk that's not down in there, just to be sure, all the way around. Usually just sort of scrape the spatula off on the paddle mixer or on the bowl. Make sure you get it all back in there. And then back on. Just for about a minute or 2, just to let it get a lot of that aeration. So in this bowl, we want to be mixing our dry ingredients. We want our 1½ cups flour, ½ teaspoon baking soda, ¼ teaspoon baking powder, and salt. We're using both soda and powder. They're both chemical leavening agents that help add lift, but baking soda will give us that nice kind of crispness around the edges, whereas baking powder makes it like sort of cakey in the middle. They do slightly different things. So, flour. Okay, this looks really great to me. It's gotten thick, it's gotten well combined, it's gotten very pale in color. So that's what you're looking for on a really well creamed butter and sugar and egg mix. We're going to do 1½ cups of flour. Anything that you're measuring in a measuring cup, you want to make sure that you do it nice and level. So I want to show you this, if I can here. This is not level. Like, that is way more than a cup of flour. So we want to make sure that you level it off either with your fingers or using like a spatula, the handle of a spatula or something like that. You just kind of scrape it off, flatten it off on the top to make sure that it's nice and level. So we've got 1 cup, and then I need a ½ cup. Nice and level measurements, or else the science doesn't quite work. Like, if you add too much flour, it's going to be too dry, and then all of that nice moisture and air and fluffiness that we created is just going to get like dense and heavy, and it won't taste quite as nice. So you want to make sure that you get all your measurements just right. ½ teaspoon baking soda, ¼ teaspoon baking powder. ½ quarter. So I do recommend using a different batch of baking soda than if you have one in your fridge. I know that's maybe a little old-fashioned, but some people still keep, I do, a box of baking soda in the fridge. It helps with like fridge smells and cleanliness, but don't use that baking soda as your baking soda. Have a separate baking soda for your actual food, just because the baking soda in your fridge does absorb flavor. I had cookies once from a friend, no names mentioned, who used the fridge baking soda, and the cookies tasted like fish because they smelled like, it just absorbs aromas very well. So you don't want to put that into your baking. So just a little tip, try to have a separate baking soda. Quarter teaspoon kosher salt. Now this is a specific recipe that is using kosher salt rather than table salt. If a recipe doesn't specify, if it just says salt, then assume it's the fine grained table salt. Most baking recipes use that, unless it specifies kosher, and that has been worked out to adjust for the larger crystals and such. So I've got all of this together, my dry baking soda, baking powder, flour, and salt. I'm just going to whisk it so that it's combined and not all the baking powders in one corner, etc. That is just going to go right in here. Let's double check. We always want to double check. Add the dry ingredients and mix until combined. Then stir in the chocolate chips. Chocolate chips, you can vary. You can use mini ones. You can use giant ones. You can use chocolate chunks. You can use dark chocolate. You can use half peanut butter chips. You can do whatever you want when it comes to those chip insertions. That will not change the science too much, unless it's like well, I'll think of something. I guess there could be something that would change it, but it won't. That wouldn't be too much of an issue if you changed your chocolate chips to a different kind of a chip or raisins or something like that. It would be fine. So I'm going to start this on low. If I just also not only would it be bad for the motor, but I would have flour everywhere. If I turn this up really fast, it would be a huge, hilarious mess. So you want to go real slow and just sort of one at a time bring the speed up on the mixer. If you're doing it by hand, you want to kind of start folding in the flour first, and then you can really go to town on it just so that you don't get a face full of flour. Just until mixed. Kind of hit the sides, try to get that flour off, but that's it. Once it's mixed, you're done. You don't want to like super over mix it. As long as there's no big chunks of flour or pieces that don't look like they haven't gotten combined. I'm going to scrape the sides just a little. There's a little bit of flour, but those will get mixed in now when I add in my chocolate chips. So I have already got that measured out. It's just 1 cup. I'm using a mixture of mini chocolate chips and regular sized chocolate chips because it's what I had. I wanted to use up the old stuff first. It's a rule in the kitchen professionally. It's called FIFO, first in, first out. So if you bought that one a week ago, you use that one first, and then makes sense, right? So you want to FIFO even your chocolate chips. You want to turn things over so you're not wasting food. I'm going to add in, doesn't matter, mini chocolate chips, big chocolate chips, it's all chocolate. And then you want to gently stir this. I'm probably going to keep it on low and just let it go for maybe 10 seconds, 20 seconds, just until I see that most of the chips have kind of incorporated into the dough. But I don't want to break up the chocolate. I don't want to like start melting the chocolate. So you just until it's mixed in. You could do that part by hand for sure. And that's it. That is the chocolate chip dough. We're going to scoop this onto one of our sheet trays. If you don't have cookie scoops specifically, that's all right. Like a large tablespoon would work. The chocolate chip cookies I'm going for are going to be about 2 tablespoons of a size. So I'm using this guy, which is I think it's actually a 1.5 tablespoon scoop. And I'm going to kind of fill it a little bit full. It's rustic. You can make your cookies whatever size you want. The point is that you've got the dough correct and that you pay attention to how they bake. Because if they're really, really big, they'll take longer. If they're teeny, teeny, tiny, they will hardly take any time at all. So you want to be aware of those things. You're going to have to rinse that off. for our lemon cookies, just because we don't have brown sugar or chocolate in the lemon cookies, but we're gonna make it in the same thing. I'm just gonna wipe this down once we're scooped, and that will be that. Let me see, I can put this here. I want you guys to see what I'm doing. I'm not gonna scoop the entire batch of cookies, just because of time. I wanna get to the lemon, but it makes about a dozen big cookies and about 18 to 20 sort of 2 bite-sized cookies. So it's really up to you. Let's see. That'll do. Okay. For easiest scooping and like quickest efficiency, this is what I do, and if it doesn't work for you, that's okay. I'm sure you'll find a different method. A lot of people just scrape it on the side of the bowl. I will just grab a big handful of it and scoop against my palm. It makes it real fast. I can kind of control how much I'm putting into the scoop. And then I use my hand to get a really nice scrape, like even scoop, because you want it to be a nice flat one if you're going for exact. That's how you can portion control and make sure every single one is the same. Just flatten it out. You've got a good level scoop. Let's see. Plus, yeah, I don't know how many times I'll say it in my various cooking classes. I really do. I learned this a long time ago. Your hands are the best tools that you can have. You can really feel what you're doing. You can kind of get a sense of like, that one didn't have any chocolate chips in it. Plus, getting your hands involved in the process just makes you more comfortable with like knowing what things feel like, getting used to just kind of hand. Let's see, where's the camera? Put it there, and then scoop. Goes really fast. I do this method for making meatballs too. Anything that you need to scoop a lot of, it's just faster than going into the bowl awkwardly over and over. You just got this big old hunk right here of cookie dough. You just scoop. Okay, I think I have more than enough for this sheet pan. I'm gonna put this aside. This cookie dough will stay in the fridge for a couple of days. Fine, it will freeze for a very long time, really, really well. As long as you wrap it very tight so it doesn't get freezer burned on the surface, you could freeze this dough for a couple of months, it'd be all right. And at that point, there wouldn't be anything bad about it. It would just be kind of too much water crystals. It would get a little bit freezer burned after a certain amount of time. So you want to make sure things are spread out about 2 inches, just because these will melt down. I'm not going for bake shop perfection, so if they kind of touch each other on the edges, that's all right. That is it. That is our tray of chocolate chip cookies. Gonna get that into the oven on the middle rack at 375. I'm gonna set the timer for about 6 minutes because I want to spin the tray 180 degrees halfway through the baking process. Some of you have taken the classes before with me and you've heard this. No oven is calibrated evenly or equally distributes the heat. Most of the heat is trying to escape out of the gaskets around the door because those are the openings that exist and the air is trying to get out. So it's hotter closer to the door. Also, it depends on the physics of like where you live and how things work. My entire building is tilted to the northeast. I think we're falling, but we'll figure that out. But everything rolls in that direction in my apartment, and the heat in my oven, the cookies that are on that far back left corner of this tray are going to cook faster than the other ones. So by spinning it 180 degrees halfway through the baking process, I'm getting a more consistent heat, a much more consistent bake and caramelization and all of the good things that we want to have happen inside this little happy oven. So a halfway spin partway through is really, really helpful for a good even cook. We're going to quickly move into the lemon cookie dough. I'm going to use my spatula and just scrape out what's left of my chocolate chip cookie dough, and I'm gonna put that in a Tupperware and bake them at another time, because you never can like make a bunch of the dough and then only bake what you want, and you can have dough in your freezer, you know, pack it out in sort of like this makes a dozen cookies kind of amounts, and then you're ready to go for weeks. It doesn't take very much of this dough to make a bunch of really delicious cookies, and you can just kind of keep the dough around. I will say, because I'm supposed to, eating raw cookie dough can be bad for you. Eating anything with raw eggs in it at a really high amount can be bad for you. And this has not only raw egg, but raw flour. Flour is also something that technically needs to be cooked before you consume it. So eating lots and lots of raw flour with raw egg in it can be bad for you. So there's your warning. I know lots of people ignore the warnings and still eat the cookie dough, and that's okay. Just don't eat all the cookie dough. It actually can be really bad for you. So I'm gonna really lightly wipe out my bowl. I don't need to worry too much about it. I just don't want there to be any chocolate on the sides. Not that that would be bad. Chocolate makes everything better in my opinion, but we're going for a really clean, fresh lemon flavor here. I want to highlight the lemon in these cookies. It's basically the most generic sugar cookie with tons of lemon zest and lemon juice added to it. And like I said at the beginning, if you are making some ice cream sandwiches or frozen yogurt sandwiches, these lemon cookies go with raspberry sorbet, especially, really, really well. They also go great with strawberry ice cream or strawberry frozen yogurt. Any of those kinds of like fresh summer berries mixed with lemon is a great combination. So really straightforward. We're going to be doing more creaming method. Once you get that down, you can pretty much make cookies. That's what you need to know to make cookies. Oven is already going to be hot. Baking sheet is already lined with parchment. We're going to cream butter and sugar, and this is a good amount of butter and sugar. I've got 2 sticks of butter. That's 1 cup. This makes more cookies than the chocolate chip cookie dough, though, and we're making them small. Just because I think having different size cookies is fun, and having a little very tart bite of lemon cookie is enough. You know, a couple of bites of that is good. So I'm gonna add my 2 sticks of butter. Add a little bit melt in that cup, that's all right. As long as most of it is still just like solid, soft butter, you're fine. Having a little bit melted, like I said, is fine, but if it were all melted butter, that would change the consistency of the way that it bakes. And you do want melted butter for some recipes, just not this one. So we've got our butter, 1.5 cups granulated sugar. We're not using brown sugar for this. Over here, we just want to use the white sugar to keep the color of the cookies a light pale color. That's how, well, brown sugar causes more of a molasses caramel color. So we want to avoid that by using just all white sugar. 1.5 cups. I'm going to pour this out because my cup is too big. Cookies are not one of the things that we need to worry about sifting. Usually, it depends on the cookie that you're making. But because we cream it so well, we beat everything together so well, and there's really, other than breaking up the chocolate chips, it's harder to overmix cookies. So there are other things in baking that we'll get to in this class that you definitely don't want to overmix. But this is not, you don't have to be quite as delicate with cookies, which is why it's a great place to start. So I'm going to bring this, ooh, I need my paddle. You always want to use the paddle attachment when you're creaming if you have a mixer. If you're using your hands, you definitely want to use something that has a super sturdy handle and a really solid connection. So like a wooden spatula, or I have these, let's see, I sell these, we use these in the teaching kitchen, very, very, very strong, stiff silicone spoons, something like that where it's not going to be flimsy on you and you can just kind of, well, beat the sugar and the butter. This is kind of, it's a good stress release too if you're doing it by hand. Think about things that are not right in the world and take it out on the butter. And then put the love back in because we want our food to taste like love. So butter and sugar, that is first we want to go just for a couple of minutes until it's nice and light and fluffy like we did with the first batch. And then we're going to be adding in our egg. And the same thing, making sure that that's really nice and smooth and fluffy. While this is going, I'm going to mix the dry ingredients together again just to get that done. So, we are mixing in a lot of flour, 2 1/4 cups flour, plus the baking powder and salt. This one doesn't have baking soda because we don't want any crisp edges on these. It's supposed to be a very soft, light, fluffy cookie the whole way through. So we're sticking with baking powder and flour and salt. So 2 1/2. Woo! A lot going on. Okay. Turn this off just so that we can look at those cookies together. So when I'm cooking and baking, I don't use oven mitts. I think that they tend to get really unsanitary inside of them. It's almost impossible to get them clean. So I use towels because it's very easy to get those clean. You just put them in a bleach wash. But clean, dry towels, they must be dry. Don't ever touch something hot if your towel has even the slightest bit of dampness to it. Just not good. Very, very painful. Okay. So I'm already getting, you can see, let's see. Come around here, I think. On this side, no, let's see, yeah. In this back corner, they're already like firm up around the edges and starting to get kind of nice and melty out. But then this front corner hasn't melted down at all, still super, super duper soft and raw. So spinning everything around once is gonna give me a lot more of an even cook, and then we're going to go for another 5 to 6 minutes. And then at the end, I'm going to show you the trick to how to get them nice and flat, because they won't ever flatten out naturally because we whip them very well. But if you want to get a nice even flat cookie, I'm going to show you it's a little brute strength. This thing's happening on my phone, doesn't matter. We are going to scrape the sides down of this because we want to make sure everything gets mixed in. This one has a lot of sugar and butter. They are sugar cookies. And so to make sure that none of the granules of sugar, we want to make sure they get really well dissolved once we start the cooking process. So making sure that it's really well mixed at this point. Plus, we want to get that real light, fluffy texture to it. I'm going to scrape it down and let it go for another minute or so. So I'm working on 2 1/4 cups of flour. Nice and even and level. You want to make sure that everything is level. I'm using a third measuring cup, but it doesn't matter. So that's 1 cup. And 2 cups. And now I need my 1/4 cup. This is looking really good. So very, very white, starting to get nice and fluffy. You can't really hurt it if you just like let this go for another minute or so. So I'm going to finish the dry ingredients and then we'll be ready. So that's 2 1/4 cups of flour. And I want 1/2 teaspoon of baking powder. You definitely want to make sure that you use the side of the jar to level it off. The spoons need to be level as well, not just the cup. Make sure that you're getting a really precise measurement on everything that you're doing. And we're also using kosher salt for this one. I don't really like kosher salt. I use that in all of my recipes. So if I've written the recipe, it's almost always going to have kosher salt. 1/2 teaspoon of that.
to give that a really gentle whisk again, just so that it's combined like we did last time. Set that down. That's it. This is very fluffy. I'm going to add in 1 egg, and we're going to do the vanilla later with the dry ingredients. So just 1 egg for this one. And like I said before, you could split this in half, but it's because it's just 1 egg that makes it a little bit more difficult to reduce it. But if you wanted to, you would crack your large egg into a bowl and whisk it 100% so that it's, you know, perfectly emulsified, no separate yolks or whites, and then you just measure out half and half. And then that way you can split a recipe. You would just then have half of an egg to use for something else. So I'm going to turn this on, let it go. Try to get this all nice and fluffy and mixed together. It'll start pulling in some of the things from the side of the bowl, but I will scrape it down 1 time. Once this is in, we're going to add in our dry with our lemon zest, lemon juice, and vanilla. So I've already got my zest done. You want to use a microplane like this. If you haven't seen, it's just a rack. It's a fine, sharp grater, and you can make really nice citrus zest or other things. You can use it for garlic and ginger as well. It's really great to get nice, finely grated ingredients. But if you don't have one of those, you can use the small holes on your box grater, the little like sharp holes on the side. That will make zest. Just don't scrape it too much. You just want the yellow, not the white part underneath. I'm going to just scrape this down 1 time to make sure that I'm getting everything from down at the bottom and especially around the sides. But the paddle attachment, it mixes obviously just like a millimeter away from the bowl. So there's always a little bit that doesn't get mixed. You need to kind of scrape it up so that it can get blended in. Otherwise it would just hit the bottom of the bowl and it wouldn't work. It would just be scraping metal the whole time. So it's just a little bit away from the bowl, which leaves food that needs to be incorporated. Once that is done though, you can see it practically looks like cake frosting. That's what you're going for. Your butter, sugar, egg combination should basically look like birthday cake frosting. Really fluffy and ready to go. So that's done. We are going to add in our dry and other ingredients here. All right, so we want to add in our dry ingredients plus the vanilla, lemon zest, and lemon juice. So I'm going to do the wet after. I'm going to just sort of slide this in here into our bowl. Fun thing about cookies too, you can just add the dry all at once. There are some baking things as we get into this that we're going to have to add things in gentle increments and all of that, but cookies are forgiving. You don't need to be super delicate with cookies, which is really nice. Lemon zest, I'm going to squeeze in lemon juice. Yay, chocolate chip. And we've got our vanilla here. Stuff ready to go. I'm going to just use a little juice squeezer, but all we're going for is a tablespoon of lemon juice. So much of the lemon flavor is coming from the zest that you don't need a ton of juice. That amount of liquid would change the way the cookies bake up. So we're trying to keep the liquid pretty low, but high in flavor. All right, so that was our chocolate chip cookies. Oh, you guys. Okay. I have to do this, show you the beauty of these. You want that kind of slightly straw colored or hay colored golden brown, like a honey golden brown starting to show. They will continue to cook. So you don't want to leave them in there until they're really dark. You're just going for this like honey colored brown starting to show. They've melted out. The bottoms, which I can't lift and show you now, are going to be a little bit more of that darker brown. At this point, they're still a little tall and fluffy, which is nice, but they're not going to melt out kind of the same. This is a trick that I learned from a baker years and years ago, and I think it works every time. So you take your sheet, loud noises, and you slam it down once on a flat surface, whether that's your counter or the stove top or a table, something safe, and you just kind of slam that tray down one time gently, just enough that the impact actually makes the cookies flatten out and spread just that last little bit, which I think is a really nice touch. And then you just leave them. They're gonna have to set up on this tray for maybe a minute or two. I don't want to transfer them while they're super soggy. While they are hot though, because I really like salty, sweet things. I am using, this is a cypress flake salt. I don't know if you can see that. Yeah, cypress salt comes from the cypress. And you can get all kinds of like flake salt or large salt, or you can even use kosher salt because it's kind of a large granule, but you can see how flaky and large that salt is. You can get that in different brands. I got this at like the local shop because I live in Little Armenia, so there's always lots of fun things going on. But while the cookies are still warm, I'm going to put just a couple of flakes of salt on the top of each one because salted chocolate chip cookies is life-changing. Just life-changing. If you haven't had this, try at least, a couple of the cookies. You don't have to do the whole dozen. You don't have to do the whole batch, but I do really recommend that you try putting a little bit of salt on top of some of your cookies. It's just life-changing. So I'm just going to finish. I'm not going to do all of mine, but I'm going to do most because that's my business. I don't know if you guys watch Tabitha Brown. You should. She's a genius. She's a wonderful vegan cook and a performer and an inspiration. And she says the most funny things, like that's my business and I love it. So find her on Instagram. She's amazing. If you take nothing from today's class, I hope it's that. Tabitha Brown. She also, her vegan recipes are easy and fun and delicious. So we have got that cooling. I've got them salted. I'll show you when they're on the rack. I want to get these in the oven because they only take 10 minutes. So we're right on the wire. 2 tablespoons lemon zest going right in. That's where all of our lemon is gonna come from. Well, most of that flavor comes from the zest. It's such a bright, refreshing ingredient. So you don't need a lot, but that's where all of our flavor is gonna come from. I need a knife. Just a tablespoon of juice. So I know I don't need much. I'm just going to squeeze this right into my spoon. Make sure that I'm measuring this. Otherwise, I'm gonna get way too much. Yeah, these lemons have a lot of juice in them. Even that tiny little sliver of lemon I cut off is too much. I already have my tablespoon of juice right in there. And vanilla is just a teaspoon. Where's my spoon? There. And this is going to bring out all of the natural kind of sweetness. It's going to help enhance the lemon flavor. And it's going to give it a little bit of that kind of faint vanilla hint that we like in baked goods. So that's it. We're just gonna mix this now. 1, and then gradually let's raise the speed up. And then once this dough is combined, that's it. We're gonna scoop them into a smaller scoop. I am, just because I want to vary the size of the cookies today. And you can do big ones, you can do medium cookies, you could roll this out into a roll, wrap it really tight, put it in the freezer, and then slice it. That's a lot of extra work for a simple sugar cookie. So once it's basically combined, I'm going to use my spatula to make sure that the sides and the bottom are very well scraped up so everything is incorporating. Yeah, it looks like everything got pretty well mixed. Oh, it smells so lemony. I wish you could smell that. Okay. So I'm just going to take this off now. All right. Now we're done with the mixer. I'm going to try to really quickly get this out of the way. Just right there. This will be a little easier for you to see some of this action now. Yeah. So I'm going to use that smaller scoop, like I said, and I'm just going to get enough to get into the oven here so we can bake them up. But since I'm doing smaller ones, it's going to take even less time. where'd the small scoop go? Here. So I'm using a similar style ice cream scoop, but the small one, this is only a teaspoon and a half. But same method, I'm going to grab a hunk of my dough. It just makes it a lot easier to scrape against my hand and scoop. If you're using spoons, then you it's probably definitely easier to use the side of the bowl. Although, let's see. This is just a tablespoon measurer. You could use that. And then you just have to get it out. But you could definitely do a similar process. Scraping it against the side of the bowl might be the best, but all you got to do is kind of put it together. Let's see. That. Yeah. A lot of different methods you could use to get these if you don't have a little ice cream scoop. If you're asking for something for your birthday, maybe some of these little baking tools would be nice. Because they do make things a lot more fun and easier for you, especially if you've got kids that want to help with this. It's a great task to give them. All right. Again, about 2 inches apart is a pretty safe rule for most cookies, unless it's a specific cookie that does not melt out. And there are cookies that don't do that, like Mexican wedding cookies don't really, and these won't melt out too much because it's mostly a denser dough than the chocolate. A little bit more flour content. All right, that's going to be enough for this tray. So again, kind of put them together. Any of these little like crumbs and scraps, it's not a big deal, but they will kind of burn on the tray. So if you bring them together and neaten it up a little bit, that's all right, but they won't hurt your cookies. So that's okay. That tray is ready to go in. Same thing, but this time it's at 350, right on the middle rack. We're gonna cook them for about 6 to 8 minutes, probably. 10 at the most, I would think. If you made them really big, then you might need to go 12 to 15. It just sort of depends on the size and on your oven. Your oven also, not only is the heat probably not super even, it's probably not the temperature it tells you it is. Most ovens are not calibrated evenly in terms of the thermometer telling the oven that it's at the right temperature. So it might say it's 350, but it's actually like 340 or mine. When I set it at 350, it's actually about 325. I have to bump my oven up a whole 25 degrees to actually get the temperature that I want. And I figure that out by using an oven thermometer and taking the temperature of the inside of my oven when it was on whatever temperature I assumed it was. And then you just adjust for that when you're cooking. And that is more important than baking. If your oven says 350, but it's actually 400, you're gonna unfortunately have a lot of ruined food. So learning that about your oven is important, but also if it is extremely uncalibrated, like way off, you can call a gas company if your oven is gas, which most of them are in Southern California. You can call the gas company and they will calibrate it for you because they want your equipment to be using their product in the most efficient way, I guess. There might be a small charge, but I think it's free. So just if you have a really wonky oven, call the gas company because it might be related to the gas intake or the thermometer, which they can help you with. If it's just an equipment issue, then you got to call the people that made the oven. So there's different things that you can look into if your oven is way off. If it's just a little bit off, you can just adjust for it, just raise it up a little or lower it down a little. So while those lemon cookies bake, we're gonna look at these chocolate. You can see some of the salt that I put on top. If you were doing the lemon sugar and you wanted to coat the outside of those cookies before they went in the oven, you can absolutely do that. I'm probably gonna sprinkle a little of the lemon sugar on top like I did with this salt while they're still warm, fresh out of the oven. And then I'm gonna get that kind of nice lemony sugar crunch on the top of the cookie, which I like, personal preference. But if you want the whole cookie to be have that sugary coating, then you toss the scoop of the dough first and then bake it. So if you are following along, at the same speed, then hopefully I caught you before you did that. But make that note. If you want them tossed in the sugar, do that before they go into the oven, if that's not already written on the recipe. Yeah. Yeah, you can make that note. You can definitely toss it before, you can sprinkle it after. It's a really nice addition either way, or you don't have to use it at all, because they're still going to be a really nice lemon sugar cookie, like I said. So these have flattened. They've gotten nice and golden. You can see on the bottom, they're that sort of perfect honey brown, which is what you want. If they get super dark, you want to give it a little smell. If it smells burnt, unfortunately, that's how you can tell. It smells a little acrid or a little bitter, then it's maybe gotten a little overdone. You'll also probably be able to tell by the color, but if you ever are wondering if it's like, ooh, is that just super brown or is that on its way to being burnt, smell it, and if it smells a little bit like that kind of acrid smell, then unfortunately it probably did go just like a hair too long. And that also is variant on the oven, but that's why I like to set my timers for partway through cooking, so that I can always kind of keep an eye on what's going on. There's a fine line though. I remember being yelled at a lot at a bakery I used to work at for how many times I would open the doors to look at things, because that releases all of the heat. So you don't want to open it a lot throughout cooking, but checking it halfway is absolutely the name of the game. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. You kind of have to do that. I'm going to look at these sugar cookies. They are not doing much because they are not going to melt much. You can press them down like the recipe says. I'm just going to let them do their thing. And then I'm going to slam them on the table like I do with the other cookies, and I think they're going to come out just fine. I'm going to set this for just 5 minutes more. We'll see how they look. Hopefully they are just done right at the end. The cleanup process is pretty simple on this because you hopefully used a lot of the same tools and equipment, which is fine. There's nothing really dangerous here that we would be super worried about with cross-contamination. If you're using something and it's got a lot of raw egg on it, then you probably don't want to mix that into something that you're not going to cook, obviously. But I try to keep my dishes at a minimum, so use as little as possible. That's why I use my hands for a lot of the different kinds of things you see. And that is cookies. Both of these go really well with sorbet and ice cream and frozen yogurts, which I've been mentioning. They're also just awesome treats. These will stay in a container like a jar or a Tupperware or Ziploc for the week. They'll still be nice and yummy. If you let them if they're not airtight, then they'll start to get stale in about 2 or 3 days. If they last that long in your house, that's awesome. I'm going to have to give most of these away if I don't want to eat all of them, which is okay. Everybody gets to share. I love cookies in the summer, though, because it is something that you can do in the morning. And the oven's only on for about 20 minutes, or depending on how long it takes to preheat. It's only a 10-minute bake on most of these cookies. So you can get them in if you have the dough already ready to go in your freezer or fridge. It's a really simple and fast way to give yourself a small treat. You know, dessert is important sometimes. So having this kind of thing around is how I can convince myself I'm still like naughty or eating bad, but just to, one at a time, portion control here and there. It's okay. So if there are any questions about the cookies or about the methods or about substituting ingredients, you can shoot them in the chat box or let me know later if you want. I think everyone has my email now. You can also find me at our Instagram, which is at UCLA Teaching Kitchen. If you don't already follow me there, please do. I make a lot of updates about classes and announce like what we might be doing next week. And when we have new classes come up on the schedule, that's usually where we try to let people know. So follow us there. If you don't have Instagram, we're also on Facebook. If you don't have social media, we have a regular website, which is fitwell.recreation.ucla.edu/teaching kitchen. Just search for UCLA Teaching Kitchen and you'll find us, I think. So lots of ways to track me down if you do have any questions or want to ask anything, whether it's about baking or anything. Next week, I'm looking forward to it. We're going to be making some salted caramel brownies. Also kind of a quick bake. It doesn't need to be in the oven for a super long amount of time, but cut into small pieces. It's just a delicious treat. I like to have them at picnics or birthdays. One day we'll be able to gather again. You can give them to your family and friends. So it's a really nice, yummy treat, but it's taking into another mixing method. So brownies mix differently than we've just learned with the creaming method. And using some different ingredients and having a little fun there. Salted caramel, as you've learned here, I really like salt in my sweet things. So you don't have to salt yours though. So I'll teach both methods. You can just make caramel brownies too. There's a lot of fun things that we're going to get into in this class, though. I've planned most of it out, and as long as there aren't any random things that come up, we're going to kind of progress from cookies to brownies into some cake, and then we're going to end the whole course with some mini pavlovas and lemon curd. And if you don't know what a pavlova is, we'll get into that later, but it's the national dessert of Australia. You can Google it. It's really delicious and really fun, and it makes you feel like a gourmet pastry chef with you'll see how easy it is. You'll see how simple it can be to make something incredibly fancy and delicious. So we're going to progress our way through this course of some really fun, delicious things. All right. I'm going to show you here. I think, yeah, sort of a shot. So you can see these don't melt out very much at all. That's because they have a much higher flour content. Just got a couple minutes left. I think this is fine. What I'm going to do is slam them down. That flattens out the bottoms a little bit, but I kind of like a doughy sugar cookie. If you want a super flat sugar cookie, then I recommend you press it down before you bake it, or like we talked about, you can roll it out into a log, freeze it, and slice it. Then you get perfectly flat little coins of cookies. I like this because then you get that kind of cakey cookie chew in the middle. I'm going to sprinkle lemon sugar all over the top of each one. And then I'm going to put them back in for maybe just a minute to let this sugar caramelize and melt just a wee bit. I know we were right on the edge of the end of class. I'll pull them out of the oven right at the end before you guys go. If you have to go before you see them, then definitely check our Instagram page because I always post pictures of the final products from all of our classes. So you can see what we made. You can see what we made in other classes, which, by the way, if you haven't signed up, we are doing weekly meal prep on Monday mornings. So I give out a shopping list, a grocery list the week before, and then teach you how to prep a bunch of different items to use for partial meal construction throughout the week. Really tasty, different assorted international flavors. Yesterday we did a sort of an Asian fusion thing. Next week we're going to be getting into farm to table type menu ideas, but it's all to give you skills that you can create your own meal plan menus and move forward with a lot of meal planning techniques. And I get to work with Amy Fisher, a nutritionist on that class, who is an expert in all of the things that we need to learn about in food, and she's just really fun. So that's Mondays, and then Wednesdays I'm doing kids cooking in the afternoons from 3 to 4. So if you have kids that want to learn how to cook, or you like really simple, fun to make recipes, even if you're not a kid, then sign up for the kids class because we do a lot of hands-on, a lot of fun cooking. Tomorrow we're making sausage rolls, also traditional to Australia. I don't know, I'm kind of feeling the Southern Hemisphere this week. So sign up for those, check out our Instagram, look for all those details, check out the website. All of the classes that we've recorded throughout the spring quarter are on the website, or they're being uploaded if they haven't been yet. So you can have access to all of those old classes and recipes as well. The recipe catalog is now open on the website and available to everyone, public included, so it's just open. All right, so I have got sugar cookies, and they look so good, and it smells like a lemon tree in my house, which is fantastic. Timer just went off. I'm going to turn the oven off, start the house cooling down. I've got all of the heat done. It's 11 a.m. and the oven does not need to come on anymore today, which is great. So the most important thing with these that you're looking for is that the bottom is solid. It doesn't have to be brown. It's just, it's been solidly baked through. And once that's done, they're pretty much done because they're going to continue cooking for a couple minutes. The carryover heat lasts for maybe 5 to 10 minutes actually. So just going to let those firm up and cool down. And I'm going to have nice crispy, cakey sugar cookies. Ta-da! All right. Right on time, 11 o'clock. Thank you for staying a couple seconds late. If you did, I appreciate you being here. I'm really looking forward to next week. Let me know if you have any issues or questions, and I'll see you guys next time. Thank you, everybody.